Long ago and far away, in the land of the rising sun, there lived a pair of Mandarin ducks. Now the drake was a magnificent bird with feathers of color so rich and beautiful, the emperor himself might have envied him. While his mate, the duck, wore the quiet tones of the woods, blending exactly with the hole in the tree where the two made their nest. Once, while the duck was sitting on her eggs, the drake went down to a nearby pond to look for some food. While the drake was on the pond, a hunting party came into the forest. Now the hunters were led by the lord of the district. He was a proud and cruel man who thought that everything in the district belonged to him, to do with as he saw fit. He was always looking for beautiful things to decorate his home and garden with. So when he saw the beautiful drake with its magnificent feathers gliding across the surface of the water, he decided to capture it. His chief steward, a man named Shozo, tried to discourage him, saying, "My lord, the drake is a wild spirit. Surely it will die in captivity." But the lord pretended not to hear Shozo, for secretly he despised him. Although he once been a mighty samurai, the warrior had lost an eye in battle, and he was now no longer pleasing to look upon. Well, the lord ordered his servants to cut a small, narrow path from the pond up through the brush, and to lay acorns along the path. So when the drake came up out of the water, he saw the acorns and forgot to be cautious, thinking only of the delicious feast they would be to bring back to his mate. One by one, he picked up those acorns in his beak. And just as he was about to get the last acorn, a net fell down over him, and the frightened bird was scooped up, carried back to the lord's manor, and placed in a small bamboo cage. Now the lord was very pleased with his drake, and he ordered that a feast be given, and that all the wealthy landowners be invited so he could share the drake with everyone and brag about its magnificent feathers. But the drake could think only of its mate, sitting alone on her eggs, wondering what had happened to her husband. As the days wore on, the drake's crested head began to droop. His beautiful feathers lost their shine. And his once proud, wild cry became first a weary cronk, and then fell silent. No matter what food the kitchen maid tried to feed the bird, it refused to eat. "Oh, he is grieving for his mate," said the kitchen maid, for she was wise in the ways of wild creatures. Now the lord liked things only as long as they were beautiful and brought him honor. And so when he saw that the drake was ailing, he was angry and ordered the bird be put out of sight in the back garden. Now when Yasuko, for that was the kitchen maid's name, saw that the bird had been cast aside, she decided to save it. One night when there was no moon, she crept quietly into the garden, and without a sound, she lifted the latch on the cage, opened the door, and since the bird was too weak to fly, she gently picked it up and carried it to the edge of the forest and set it down. The bird shook its feathers and then turned as if to bow to Yasuko and blended quickly into the dark night. Now in a large house, there are always those that delight in causing mischief. And so it was that news of the drake's disappearance reached the ears of the lord by mid-morning. And immediately, Shozo was called for. "Why have you robbed me of my drake?" Shozo simply bowed his head. Although he had not taken the bird, he'd often thought about doing so, and to his simple mind, thinking about lifting the latch on the cage and actually doing it were one and the same. The Lord ordered that Shozo be beaten and stripped of his rank in the household. And though he'd once been a mighty samurai, second only to the Lord himself, Shozo was now forced to scrub the toilets and to haul the waste. When Yasuko saw how Shozo had been humiliated, she went to him and told him everything and begged him to let her confess. But he forbade her, saying, "Why should two suffer for one crime?" But he took comfort in her concern. Now, as the days passed on, Yasuko and Shozo grew to love each other. And soon their love shone so brightly it could no longer be hidden. And so it was that mischief maker brought news of the couple's love to the Lord. And Yasuko and Shozo were ordered into his presence. "It is apparent to me that the two of you have conspired to rob me of my drink. I have been merciful up to now, but you have taken advantage of my good nature. I must make an example of you to all who resist my will. You are hereby sentenced to death by drowning." Well, since the Lord's word was law, there was no way they could oppose him. The Lord ordered that the couple be bound and prepared to march to the pond for execution. But just as they were about to set out, two messengers arrived at the Lord's gate. And it was apparent by their rich dress that they were messengers of great importance. "We are imperial messengers sent by the emperor. He has had a vision, and in his vision he was ordered to do away with capital punishment throughout the empire. Therefore, if there's anyone under the sentence of death in your district, you are ordered to send him to the capital at once." Well, the Lord was angry with the order, angry enough to kill the messengers who had brought it. But he knew he had no choice. He must obey. So he ordered his guards to march the couple to the capital. Now the march was a 5-day journey. And by the end of the 3rd day, Yasuko and Shozo were so tired they could hardly put one straw sandal step in front of the other. In the middle of a deep, dark forest, they began to lag behind, and the guards kept poking them, saying, "Hurry up, hurry up." For although the guards seemed quite brave, they were really very afraid of the deep, dark forest. As night fell, Yasuko and Shozo fell further and further behind, and soon they realized that they had been left behind. They were alone, with their hands tied behind them, in the middle of a deep, dark forest. They tried to stumble on, but they soon lost the path. "Aye!" cried Yasuko. "See what I've done! If it were not for my foolishness, we would be safe and warm back in the Lord's manor." "Hush," said Shozo. "It is not foolish to show compassion to a fellow creature. Besides, what danger of the forest could match the cruelty of our former master?" "Oh, I just wish my hands were not bound behind me. I would not be so frightened if I could put my hand in yours." "Come here," said Shozo. "Lean your shoulder against mine so we will not lose each other in the darkness." Just then, they heard rustling in the bushes, and they stood as still as stone pillars, trying not to be frightened. "Ah, we have found you. Do not be afraid. We've come to take you to a place where you can rest." Who are you that speaks to us out of the darkness?" "We are the imperial messengers," said another whose form was hidden by the dark night. Well, Yasuko and Shozo couldn't help be frightened, but they knew they must obey. So they followed the two dark forms through the forest. Oh, the rustling of their silk garments made an eerie sound as those messengers passed on ahead. Hour after hour, they went through the forest until at last they came to a small clearing. and in the moonlight, they saw a hut made of wood and grass. The messengers brought Yasuko and Shozo inside. First, they lit a lamp, and then they unbound the couple's wrists and gently massaged them. And then each of them was allowed a long soak in a great wooden tub filled with clean, hot water. After their baths, they were dressed in fresh kimonos, and a great feast was set before them. Well, Yasuko and Shozo were so hungry and tired, they didn't even think to ask where the messengers had gotten such delicious food in the middle of a forest. After they finished their meal, mats and quilts were laid out for them on the floor, and the two fell fast asleep. In the morning, they were awakened by the smell of rice steaming and bean soup bubbling in an iron pot. They jumped up and looked around, but the messengers were nowhere to be found. "Oh, we have failed to thank them for their kindness," said Yasuko. And he ran to the door. There on the path was a pair of Mandarin ducks. The drake was a magnificent bird with feathers of colors so rich and beautiful, the emperor himself might have envied him. While his mate, the duck, wore the quiet tones of the woods. The two birds turned as if to bow to Yasuko and Shozo, and then they flew as straight and swift as arrows fly above the highest treetops. Yasuko and Shozo lived on for many years in that hut of wood and grass. They had many children who brought them much happiness and a little trouble. But as they had learned years earlier, trouble can always be born when it is shared.